experts, public safety professionals and experts. Beginning to my far right, Mr. Carlton Berkeley, retired detective Graham Witherspoon, CO Charles Billups, who is the head of the Guardians, and retired Sergeant Anthony Miranda from the Latinos Officers Association. This is Carlton Berkeley. This is Graham
Witherspoon, Charles Billups,
Anthony Miranda.
We had just concluded a very extensive and candid meeting with both the Commissioner of the Department of Investigations as well as the new NYPD Inspector General, Mr. Phil Eeyore. These gentlemen behind me can give you further insight as to the substance of the meeting as law enforcement professionals and experts, and then we can go into additional issues and concern. Carlton?
As you know, the office has just been put together, but he heard our concerns. We come from the communities in which we live in, and in regards to the Eric Garner case, that was the case that really brought us here. And in that case of Eric Garner, I'm here to tell you that there were numerous violations committed by the police officers as well as the sergeant on the scene. And I'm talking about department guidelines, where, let's get it right, the chokehold, I came on the job in '84. The chokehold has been banned since 30 years, back in 1983. So let's get it right. Officers know that they are not to use chokeholds, and it's forbidden. Also, the officers in the Eric Garner case, they weren't properly identified. Like I said, there are a slew of violations that the officers committed themselves. And we're here to hope that accountability is given to them. All of the officers that participated in the death of Eric Garner, all of them should be disciplined, and we're not going to accept anything less. And as far as Pat Lynch attacking our Reverend Sharpton, he is our leader. He is the person that we go to. And as far as Lynch saying that Reverend Al doesn't speak for everyone, well, I would like to see Pat Lynch come to our communities and speak to the communities himself. You know, he would be lucky and be happy to deal with Al Sharpton rather than for Pat Lynch to come into our community and deal with the residents there.
Sir, can you just identify yourself so we know one by one?
Carlton Berkeley, retired second grade New York City detective.
Thank you.
Berkley.
We will now hear from retired Detective Graham Witherspoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Graham Witherspoon. I'm with the Black Law Enforcement Alliance. The murder of Eric Garner is extremely disturbing because we've seen this far too many times. As the Staten Island District Attorney prepares this case and his investigation, we want you, the general public, to have an understanding of some of the criminality that went forth that you saw with your own eyes. And I'm going to read a registry of charges that are visible in the video that you saw. And understand, the early statute in the New York State Penal Code, section 5.0, says that the law is not to be strictly construed, but is to be used for the fair deportment of justice, which means that a law enforcement officer has the latitude to give a warning to an individual as opposed to arresting them, especially for something as minute as the sale of cigarettes. Charge number 1, Penal Law Section 125.25, murder in the second degree. A person is guilty of murder in the second degree under circumstances evincing a depraved indifference to human life, where he recklessly engages in conduct that creates a grave risk of death to another person and thereby causes the death of that person. That felony charge is an A1 felony. Murder in the second degree, an A1 felony. where the person acted in an especially cruel and wanton manner, pursuant to a course of conduct intended to inflict or inflicting torture upon the victim prior to the victim's death. And used in this subparagraph, torture means the intentional and depraved infliction of extreme physical pain. Murder in the first degree. The person is guilty, manslaughter second degree. Person is guilty of it when, with intent to cause serious physical injury to another person, he causes the death of such person or a third person. That is a B felony. Criminal negligent homicide. A person is guilty of criminal negligent homicide when, with criminal neglect, he causes the death of another person. Criminal negligent homicide is an E felony. Reckless endangerment in the first degree. A person is guilty of reckless endangerment in the first degree when, under circumstances evincing a depraved indifference to human life, he recklessly engages in conduct that creates a grave risk of death to another person. That is a Class D felony. Criminal obstruction of blood and circulation. A person is guilty of criminal obstruction of breathing or blood circulation when, with intent to impede the normal breathing or circulation of blood in another person, he or she applies pressure on the throat or neck of such person or blocks the nose or mouth of such person. Criminal obstruction of breathing or blood circulation is in Class A misdemeanor. Strangulation in the second degree is a hate crime. A person is guilty of strangulation in the second degree when he or she commits the crime of criminal obstruction of breathing or blood circulation as defined in section 1.1.11 in this article, and thereby causes stupor, loss of consciousness for any period of time, and or physical impairment. Strangulation in the first degree is also a hate crime. A person who obstructs the breathing or blood circulation as defined in that article and is thereby causing serious physical injury to such person. Other terms you will hear: culpable, culpability, culpable mental state. These are terms that are going to be thrown around over the next few months. For the members of the press, I'm going to give you a contact where you can get a copy of this. It's 10 pages. I'll give you an email address. You can send it out, and I'll get it back to you this evening. The PBA has said they had a problem with the medical examiner. It's interesting. The PBA relies upon the medical examiner. I, as a detective, relied upon the medical examiner in proving my cases. But because a police officer is involved in the commission of a crime, it's a problem with the medical examiner. You can't use the same medical examiner to send civilians to prison and say he's incredible or incredulous when the suspect is a police officer. Let's get something clear. Police officers come from within our society. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Just yesterday, a police officer was arrested in the application unit requesting a woman send her panties to him and to meet him at a hotel. He was arrested. As a detective, I investigated police officers. I sent a rookie cop to prison for raping a 15-year-old girl. I sent a PBA delegate to prison for brutalizing a man and maiming him. Police officers do commit crimes. But I will say this in closing. The majority of the men and women working in NYPD are honorable people. And I'm proud to have been a police officer because I saw the problem in my community, which is why I became a police officer. If 1% of NYPD is bad, we have a serious crime problem. 1% of 34,000 people is 340. 340 armed individuals walking around the streets of New York purporting to be a police officer with a gun and a badge is intolerable. Our meeting with the IG today, with the Commissioner of the Department of Investigation, we found to be very profitable. And we trust that in the next coming months you will see the proceeds of that meeting. It is important that the people of the city of New York keep their issues in the forefront of their mind and register their complaints with the Civilian Complaint Review Board. Register their complaints with the Department of Investigation. Register them with the Inspector General, NYPD. These agencies will be working independent of the Civilian Complaint Control Board. I'm finished.
Next, we will hear from Charles Billup, the chairperson of the Grand Council of Guardians.
I'm Charles Billup, chairperson of the Grand Council of Guardians. We came here today to answer those questions the majority of y'all are standing here. What's going to happen next, or what should happen next, and how we feel about it, particularly black law enforcement. I represent a large number of law enforcement cops here in New York City and probably throughout the state. The issue is now is that, like I asked the Inspector General upstairs, what's going to happen next? What are they going to do about it? We realized that they said they need time. That they just started. They only been in motion now for the last couple of months. And the issue is, you know, we want to go to someone and we want to ask someone about correcting the problems. And everyone looked to them as maybe they're the ones who can solve the problem. And we realize that now it's more than just that. It's more than just them too also. It's the need to make some changes throughout the city, particularly the police department. And we talked about dealing with the quotas, we talked about dealing with the patents, we talked about dealing with the culture in that department and about trying to make some changes. Because those systemic problems will exist if nobody says anything or they're not addressed. So the question comes up now, and I was somewhat harsh about it because I was, what are you going to do? And because this is what everyone wants to know. What are you going to do about it? And again, like I said, they said they're going to be checking the patents because people need to realize their positioning. And them explaining it now let you know that they can only do so much in the idea because it must be dealing with patents. But getting back to my organization, I support these fellow officers here. We truly believe what Platt Lynch was saying. You know, I employed him and I give him credit for standing for his members, but he's wrong. He's just dead wrong. He needs to stop. He needs to deal with and look at union issues instead of dealing with what's going on in the community. I mean, you're doubting and you're second guessing and you're downplaying what the medical examiner says and does is an insult. It's no more than when now he just recently jumped on the bandwagon and trying to stop the stop and frisk, in which he should be fighting to stop the stop and frisk because it affects his members, because it generates quotas for the fellow officers out in the street. So I don't understand the reason why he said it. It doesn't make any sense, and he needs to stop. And something needs to be done. And I'm telling my officers who are members of our organization now, to think twice about what's going on, to react a little differently, and they must deal with this. They must deal with it in a different manner because it affects our community. And now we've just lost a lot of trust in the community among ourselves where we work at. So it must be dealt with some type of form of fashion. Only thing I want to end on saying is that I hope and pray that this new Inspector General can really make some changes and change the culture inside the police department. Otherwise than that, it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money, it's a waste of energy.
So what promises were made to you guys up there by Mr. Ure or by Mr. Peters?
We'll do questions in a moment. Sergeant Anthony Miranda from the Latino Officers Association.
Again, I'm retired from the New York City Police Department. I'm Anthony Miranda, chairman of the National Latino Officers Association. I want to first make a comment about the statements that they're giving to Phil Banks, the chief of the department. Enforcing quality of life existed before Phil Banks came in the police department, before he got his current title. Any indication differently is erroneous. To say that somehow the Gardner case is a direct result of the input of Chief Banks, I think it's just diluting the issue and bringing attention that's unnecessary. Quality life enforcement, enforcing the ban on cigarette sales, that has existed far beyond him becoming the chief of the department. Now, just to address today's meeting, we met with the Inspector General. We thought it was a productive meeting. He gave us some insight as to the responsibility of his office. He's talking about addressing patterns. It doesn't have a direct, immediate impact on the Gardner case. He's He's talking about addressing patterns of police misconduct, of police behavior, police culture that can be addressed. The Gardner case had an opportunity to highlight some of those patterns that may exist or do exist inside the police department. He spoke about working with our organizations, all our various organizations, and being able to have dialogue and continuous input of information, exchange of information on a regular basis. We thought that was very productive. Some of the patterns that we highlighted when it came to speaking about the Gardner case was the quota system that we obviously know existed, that unit was out there operating under a quota system when they got involved with Gardner. We also spoke about the summons quota system that they had, and they were in existence during the Gardner case. We spoke about the pattern of behavior and the pattern in the police department about not taking adequate discipline when their officers are being charged with serious criminal charges. Giving an officer a paid vacation is not serious enough to send a message to the rest of the rank and file members, and this is also a pattern. We spoke about, again, not just the Gardner case, but a host of other cases that have gone on that resulted in the abuse or assault on people of color, and we thought that they needed to address it, and we spoke about identifying those patterns. Again, it was a productive meeting. We thought that there'll be something in the future that we'll have continual dialogue on, and we look forward to working with him in the near future.
Before we go into questions and answers, I just want to take this opportunity to thank Commissioner of the Department of Investigations, Commissioner Peters. I want to take this opportunity to thank the new Inspector General, Mr. Phil Ure, for being so gracious and generous with their time and so willing to hear from professionals in law enforcement. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the mayor for allowing us to have this dialogue with the administration. In past administrations, we had to scream and shout. In this administration, we just need to pick up the phone and communicate. And so we have seen a vast quantum leap forward in that regard. There are other issues that are still pending, but first and foremost, as Reverend Sharpton has so eloquently reminded us, the bottom line here is justice for Eric Gardner. He was killed by the use of an illegal chokehold. The video demonstrates that. The officers in the video that did nothing aided in the death of Eric Gardner. The EMS that arrived on the scene and did nothing aided in the death of Eric Gardner. And we cannot sit back and allow these officers and these EMS to go unchecked or not held accountable to the law. We are focused on putting pressure on the prosecutors, the local and federal prosecutors, to do what is right in this case, to hold these individuals accountable to the law as everyone else would be held accountable to the law. I live in Bed-Stuy, and if I had a hoodie on and did half of the things that these officers were accused of, we would be having this press conference under the jail. Why are we demanding justice when we see clearly the injustice on the video? The medical examiner, the coroner, issues an autopsy report, which validates what we already have seen in the video. And there are some that want to take reason and rationality and shred it and evoke emotion and try to drag us back. We're not going back. We're going to move forward. We're going to move this city forward. We're going to move the issues of justice for Eric Gardner forward. We're going to move the issues of justice for all of our communities forward. And that begins with holding those who are responsible for his death accountable for his death. We'll take questions.
Also talk to us about the march. Is that march supposed to put pressure on the prosecutors and others as well? And there's been somewhat of a controversy about whether you should march over the Verrazano Bridge because it stops traffic. Can you speak to those issues and your determination to march over the bridge?
Staten Island's an island. The way to get on the island is go over the bridge. We are going to go over the bridge one way or another, on foot, on heels, or on wheels. That determination has to be made by those we are working with. But we will be taking thousands of people to Staten Island. The issue has never been the bridge. Reverend Sharpton has said from the beginning the issue is about justice for Eric Gardner. And if that means that we've got to ride to Staten Island, we'll ride. If we've got to fly, we'll fly. If we've got to march to the moon to get justice, we'll march to the moon. It's not about the Verrazano Bridge. It's not about Phil Banks. It's not about Lucy's. It's not about Pat Lynch. It's about justice for Eric Garner.
So does it look like it's going to be a compromise where you might take buses over so that it wouldn't completely stop traffic on the Verrazano?
This is no compromise. We have always said from the beginning, we intend to go to Staten Island over the Verrazano Bridge to bring pressure to the prosecutor. How that is executed, implemented, is still yet to be seen, but we are guaranteeing you today, we are going over that bridge on heels or wheels.
So it's not necessarily a march?
No, there will be a march. There will be a march. Well, if we have to bus over the bridge and march, we'll do that. If we've got to march over the bridge and march, we'll do that.
Just to clarify, because the police commissioner says to me that they still have not received a permit application. Is there the are you intending to apply for a permit? And if you don't have a permit, will you still attempt to walk across the Verrazano Bridge?
I don't think we should put a cart before the horse. If we're still trying to negotiate how we're going to get there, there's no way we can ask for a permit. We've got to ask for a permit based on what we know we're going to do, not based on what we think we're going to do.
Ask for a permit in the future. Once you decide what you're going to do.
National Action Network does not ask for permits. Other of our partners may ask for a permit. The permit is not the issue. The bridge is not the issue. Again, the issue is how do we get the attention of the prosecutors and how do we get them to understand that we are serious? We're not going to let this issue rest. We're not going to let them kick the ball down the field. They have to deal with the fact that Eric Garner is dead as a result of an illegal chokehold applied by New York City police
And
officers.
will that kind of demonstration put pressure on the prosecutor and the U.S. attorney to do things?
Absolutely. If, in fact, we drive into Staten Island with buses to bring thousands of people and vans and cars, that will be attention-getting. The prosecutor will know whether he turns on the television or gets phone calls from his neighbor that these buses, scores of buses, are driving past their homes to protest in front of his office. He will get the picture and they will understand this is not the end. This is not a one-off deal. This is not a one-shot deal. This is the beginning of a protracted movement to achieve justice for Eric Garner. And this is just the first step in that movement.
Just to follow up, have you been basically told by the administration
I'll
in
come
those
back to you, Dean.
negotiations that
Yeah, I want you to clarify what DOI that you actually tell you about. That was them, what they tell us.
The purpose of the meeting from their point of view was a fact-finding meeting. It was a listening meeting. They needed to hear from professionals with years and years, decades of expertise, that the things that they may be told by the people who are on the job today may or may not be true. They needed to hear that there is another vantage point of policing from people who are experts and professionals in that field. They needed to hear the specific policies that needed to be advocated for and changed. They needed to hear the specific cases that pointed and undergirded those policy changes and those recommendations. So they were really there to listen. It was an open forum. There was some dialogue. There were no promises made other than they will execute their mission, which is to provide oversight over policy and regulation and procedure for the NYPD.
Just two questions. Why do you need to apply pressure to the prosecutor now? Is that considered interference? And then secondly, can you just clarify your remark that Pat Lynch would be happy to deal with Al Sharpton rather than people in your community? Is that a threat to Pat Lynch?
No, it's not. Nothing
Step to the microphone, sir. I'm sorry.
Nothing is a threat to Pat Lynch. Pat Lynch went on New York One and said that Al Sharpton doesn't speak for the community. Well, Al Sharpton does speak for the community. Who is Pat Lynch? Al Sharpton can pick up the phone and call the president. Pat Lynch can't pick up the phone and call the commissioner. You know, so what I'm saying to him is that Al does speak for us. You know, and if Pat doesn't like it, why don't Pat come into the neighborhoods when his cops are overzealous and they do something such as to Eric Garner? Why don't he come to the neighborhood and speak to the people? That's what I'm proposing to him.
And just a second, can you just speak to the fact that you're applying pressure to a prosecutor who's in the middle of an investigation, is that considered
We're
interference?
applying pressure to a prosecutor that has allowed an individual that the medical examiner said committed murder to walk the street. You know, there are people who are investigated every single day, but they have to spend that time being investigated in jail. We are saying what makes this officer any different than anybody else who has been found to have committed homicide. Nothing, other than the fact that he has a blue uniform and a silver shield.
Follow up that last question really quickly on the bridge. I'm sorry. Has it been indicated to you by the administration that they will not allow people on foot to go across the Verrazano Bridge?
That indication has not come.
They haven't said it's unlikely, not going to happen.
We are still in the process of figuring out how to get from point A to point B, and the administration is a part of that process.
Did you discuss the meeting, the march? Was it discussed in the meeting?
No, we did not discuss the march.
Back to the march issue. Your flyer says march. I talked to you 2 days ago. You said you were going to go on foot on the bridge. What changed? I mean, you say that was never your intention, but that's just not correct.
No, that's not correct. Our intention is to go to Staten Island. And whether I said march and you construed it as foot, or whether I said foot and meant march, is really irrelevant. The issue is that we have to take people to Staten Island because this prosecutor has been negligent in holding this police officer accountable to the law.
The prosecutor has said that, you know, he's not going to allow any of these demonstrations or anything like that to interfere with his process. And he's saying, you know,
I'm curious to know what's interfering with this process now. We have not gone to Staten Island and we haven't seen any fruits of his labor. We see an officer that the medical examiner said committed homicide. We see a videotape where the officials, the city officials, and many of them acknowledge that a chokehold was used, an illegal chokehold. What is interfering with the prosecutor's execution of his duties now? We're not on Staten Island today. We haven't gone to Staten Island today.
Just to clarify, do you want to see this officer handle your charge of murder?
Yes, we do.
I personally, and every person who witnessed this incident should be outraged. All right? That was a human being laying on the ground. I've seen people in this city give better respect to a dog. I saw a professional football player go to prison because he was training dogs to fight. Isn't that right? I saw a guy in Brooklyn who threw his pit bull out the window get arrested. But I see a black man who is begging to breathe on the ground. And you're asking me a question like that?
So you would like to see him charged with the second degree murder?
If you're responsible, you need to take the weight for what you did. All right? And this was not an accident. He repeatedly said, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Let me grab you and hold you on the ground. You should be outraged. Instead of asking me a question like that, you should be outraged. Every person in this city should be outraged by what they saw coming from police officers. Because the broken windows are in the police department. That is our problem. We had 12 years of Ray Kelly and Mike Bloomberg, which was hell on wheels here. And these guys have gotten away with killing people for years, violating people's constitutional rights, illegal search and seizure, and there was no outcry. We spoke against stop and frisk 13 years ago. Elliot Spitzer wrote a decision on it 13 years ago. Ray Kelly totally ignored the chief law enforcement officer of the state of New York and continued with stop and frisk for 13 years. This is why we're in the condition we're in now. Because we had leadership that feels that they don't have to answer to a city council, to a mayor, or even to the attorney general of the state of New York. And that attitude has trickled down through the police department, and this is where we are today. And it stops. Like he said, it stops here. It stops here. Have a good day.
I think that's it, folks. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you.
Some stupid ass question. Mr. Boyle? Oh, she's right there.
Repeat your question.
What's that?
What was your question? I got you on camera laughing about it.
Okay.
Why don't you finish what you said? You thought it was funny. You think I saw you laughing? I got you on camera laughing.
Good for you.
Repeat your question again.